Hello, this is Mr. Green, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to paint an eye onto a pebble using acrylic paint. Now, acrylic paint doesn't wash off clothes, so you will need to wear an apron and be careful not to get it on any of your clothing. To save you from clearing up at the end, we always work on a piece of paper and we put the acrylic paint onto a piece of cardboard so that at the end of the lesson it can either be used by somebody else or it can go straight in the bin without having to do any washing up. The most common mistake that people make with acrylic paint is they put it on too thick and they put too much on the brush. So it's really important that you always wet your brush so that it won't pick too much paint up, and apply it thinly. It should always be watered down. You'll get a much better result with a few thin layers than with one thick layer. I'm going to begin by drawing a rough outline onto the pebble to show where I'm going. Just make sure we can see that, yeah. And this is going to be painted over, so anything I draw now will be covered up, because acrylic paint covers really well. If you accidentally paint something black, you can paint it white and then paint it any colour you want. If you accidentally paint something white, you can paint over it with a darker colour as well. So mistakes don't really matter, they can always be corrected. Right, that's plenty of detail on there for now. And I'm just going to get the basic colours on. So I'll begin by dipping my brush in the water. I'll scoop a little bit of white out and then I'll mix it on the paper here. It's important that you wipe your brush off so that you've always got a point on it, a fine point. And then I'll just put a base layer on. So you can see that's going on very thinly, and because it's thin, it will dry very quickly. If you put a thick blobby layer on, you'll be waiting the whole lesson for it to dry. This doesn't need to be a perfect layer of white because it's going to be painted over anyway. And you'll notice I'm painting in between the lines so that I can still see my guidelines. There we go. Once we've got one layer of paint on, future layers go on much more smoothly. Now, as this video is going to be quite a few minutes long, I suggest you click on the cog and then change the playback speed to either 1.25 or 1.5 speed. And I might talk a bit like a chipmunk, but you'll still be able to understand what I'm saying. Right, there we go. There's plenty of detail for the first layer. Now, actually, some of that's drying already, and I'm going to mix the fleshy colour. So I'll start with this yellow ochre. I'll add a little bit of red to it, a little bit of white. Notice I'm only taking a tiny bit at a time, and I'm dipping the brush in water so that the paint goes onto the paper nice and flat. If you're getting a big lump, like a dollop of tomato sauce, your paint is too thick. Now, you don't need to get the perfect skin tone, because this is, again, it's just a base layer. Right, I'm looking at this one here. Put that on, you can see it goes nicely over the white. It's like a light grey, it's not pure white yet. Put that on there, and notice when I'm painting, the brush is hardly bending. And you can't see the paint standing up, it's very flat on the surface, it's not thick. Then I'm going to start adding a bit of shading. So I've added a bit of white, a bit of the ochre, again it's gone thick. So I'll just thin it down slightly. And I'll start adding that light edge at the top of the bottom eyelid. There's a crease in the skin there, so I'm putting the highlight. That's in the centre of those two creases. And then where the light's catching the top eyelid, I'll put that colour in as well. Notice I'm holding my hands together. That's to stop them from shaking too much and just to keep them steady. There we go. And then for the shadow here, I'll mix a bit of brown, and you make brown by mixing blue and orange. And you know that orange is made out of red and yellow, don't you? So it's gone too green, so I'll add the opposite colour to green, which is red. got quite ready there. Oh, hold on, it's turning the right colour now. A little bit of the ochre to cheat, then I can put this shadow in. You can see I'm doing long flowing lines with the brush, some short strokes, and then also log lines. That's how you get a smooth line on your painting. Right, now while I've got the same colour, just add a little bit more red, mix it a bit with that. I'll use that as a starting point for these colours in here, the shadows in the whites of the eyes and the corners, because we call them the whites of the eyes, but if you look, they're not actually very white at all. So there's that shadow there. Then I'll add a bit of white to it, get like a light fleshy colour there. And notice what I'm doing now. Now that I'm getting into the details, I'm just using the very tip of the brush, and you won't see the brush bending as I'm painting. Lots of little brush strokes gradually build things up, and you'll be thinking that's not the right colour for that, but all I'm doing is creating a gradual change from the dark to the light. Do lots of little dashes with the brush now, no longer doing those long continuous strokes. There we go, now we've got a bit of a blend going on from the dark to the light. And then I'll change, so I've still got that colour on my brush. I'm adding more white to it. I'm adding a touch of black because I wanted to go a little bit grey like it is in the photo. Just using the tiniest amount of black, just the very tip of the brush touching it. That on. Right, now this is never going to look right while the iris is still that pale grey colour. So what I need to do now is start mixing my iris colour. So I'll use the blue, a bit of yellow, and when you're painting the iris, there needs to be at least 8 different colours in there. Lots and lots of different shades of green, there's a bit of yellow, there's a bluey colour over here, there's a very pale whitey blue, there's very dark green. So don't try to colour it in one colour. You build it up with a mixture of colours. And notice the lines sort of radiating out from the centre, like the spokes on a bike wheel. So there's my first layer, doesn't look much yet. Don't get disheartened if it doesn't look right straight away. That's what we're aiming for. We're about a third of the way through. Right, so I'm putting some of these lighter colours. I'm constantly looking at the photo. Every second or two I'm taking a glance at the photo to see where I'm going with these colours. Right, now that's not going to look right until I get some dark in. So just using the tiniest bit of black, mix them together. The more watered down and thin the paint is, the pointier your brush will be and the more precise you can be with your detail. Just catching it with a couple of hairs on the end of the brush, putting this dark edge on the iris. You might have noticed in the photo there is no gap below the iris, and in my painting there is, but that'll change as I get further into it. There's the dark rim. Don't be tempted to use black. Black should be going on last. If we put black on now, it'll just make it look like a cartoon and it'll overpower everything. Dark in there. It looks black in comparison to the other colours, but it's actually quite a way off. Right, now all this corner here is dark. Dotting that in. Some of these little radiating lines in as little dashes. Dark because of the eyelid. Just darken that shadow a bit as well while I've got that colour on my brush. edging. You see I'm having to go over each area a few times until I get a mark, because I'm being so careful not to touch it too hard. Right, I am going to use almost black now. I've got green on my brush, so it's not pure black, it's almost black, and I'll just put the pupil in. Start to bring the eye to life. Paint's drying very quickly in this heat. Now, because eyeballs are wet, you get reflections on them. So when you're creating a piece of art, including an eyeball, it's the reflections that bring it to life. So I'll put the white reflections on now, and you'll start to see what I mean. So I'll mix a little bit of blue in with this. Notice I haven't touched that one. I'm leaving that for later. I'll use the colour that I've already got out. I'll just put some of these highlights in. Obviously it doesn't matter if you get them in exactly the same position as the photo, that would be almost impossible, but you want the same quantity of them in the same areas. We've got quite a nice big reflection here with the eyelashes showing through them. Now remember I said with acrylic paint, if you paint something black you can always paint over it white and vice versa. So I'm going to paint over these eyelash reflections, and then I'll probably put them back in later. Right, so reflection there, so reflection on the pupil itself here, and that's what shows you that it's wet, or gives it the impression of being wet. Oops, slipped out my hand. Getting there now. Obviously I've got to strike the balance between doing it well enough to show you how to do it and not making this video too long. So if I wanted it perfect I'd probably take a bit more time over it, which is what I did with that example one there. Right, now let's compare. So the white of the eye needs to be more white. We'll see that now. So if I thin down some white, my brush has still got the green on, it's got the pink on, so I'm not getting a pure white. Thin it down, this will gradually lighten this up. What I can do as well when I'm putting the white on is I can tidy up the edge of the iris where I didn't get the shape quite perfect. A bit happier with that now. And then I'll start putting the eyelid in its final position. Going a bit too pink there compared to the photograph I'm working from, so I'll add a bit of ochre to dull it down a bit. Notice I'm rolling the brush, that helps get a point on it. Right, so I'll put the eyelid in now. This is where I move it up a little bit into the right position. I think that's probably enough detail for a demonstration. But the final thing is the eyelashes. Probably been waiting for me to do that. I'll just put that blob in there. Bit of this colour, yeah. Right, so for the eyelashes, what you don't want is a series of parallel dashes. That would again look quite cartoon-like. So I'm getting some black, I'm watering it down a lot. I'm rolling the brush so that I've hardly got any paint on it. And then I can try it on here. See, I should get a very fine line, yeah. A bit more water actually, it's still too thick. And you're just catching it with a couple of bristles on the end of the, that's better. Right, study the photograph carefully and then create the same sort of pattern. So I've got a couple there, a couple here. Make sure you don't space them out evenly. That looks very artificial if you do that. They come all the way to here. Brush is drying very quickly. And then I've got some in the centre. Just making sure I hold the brush very near the end so I've got lots of control. And if you're going to turn your work around, make sure you turn the photo around as well. We'll go. Now notice your eyelashes don't go right into the corner of your eye. They sort of thin out as they get towards the tear duct. This is the nose end of the eye. A few more there. That'll be enough. And then on the bottom, I'm going to turn it so that I can do this with my wrist and get the right shape. Overlap them because they do seem to overlap each other here. See, the brush is almost dry now, but I'm still getting a few marks coming off it. Well, that's about ready. Be careful not to overdo it. It's very easy to keep going too long and overdo it. And I'm reasonably happy with that. And then when you've finished it, we'll let it dry for a good 10 or 15 minutes, and then I can put some lacquer on it, which we spray on, and you'll get that effect there.